Real Women, Real Issues with Teresa Mullaney. And this afternoon, I've got Cathy Garner, who is a relationship expert and calls herself the relationship artist. Welcome, Cathy.
Oh, thanks, Teresa. It's lovely to be here.
You're welcome. So shall we kick off by just asking you, what's it like being a woman?
I love this question because I love being a woman. I think we have a very, a kind of fast track, don't we, to all the things we need. Women are great at connecting with one another. They're great at giving each other the love and the attention and the security and all the things that we need. We're very attuned, I think, naturally, many women are, to supporting each other and giving each other what we need. And I think we're also very good at getting in touch with ourselves. And I think as a woman who loves to connect with people, loves spending time with people, I just love the fact that we can cuddle each other, we can kiss each other, we can cuddle everyone, can't we? I mean, poor blokes, they really have that question: do I or don't I? Do I give the fair ladies? Do I give them a big old brotherly hug? And we don't have those questions. We can just connect with everyone, and I love that.
Ah, that is such a beautiful answer. Yeah.
Well, I've always loved being a woman. I've always felt it's a real privilege being a woman. I think there are these questions about, is there a glass ceiling? And are we ever limited from doing things? I remember a train journey back in 1997, I think it was. I was on a train journey crossing India, and I was talking right into the small hours with this wonderful woman who was there with her family. She had a husband and a boy aged 10. She was about my age, and I was fresh I was married at 21. So I'd only been married a couple of years, and my husband was asleep, and her husband and her son were asleep. And we sat there and we just talked about our experiences as women. And she was marveling really at the ability that I had just to be able to travel. That we could just fly to the other side of the world and go wherever we wanted to go. And it felt like a real privilege speaking with her. And over the years, I've worked with many women self-help groups in India, and also with women in the UK, and just to see what we're capable of when we don't believe in the limits around us. So when I was back in India in 2007, I spent quite a lot of time working with women's self-help group projects down in Tamil Nadu. And the most extraordinary thing I learned from those women, and these were women who were no education whatsoever. They had simply had some training about being part of a self-help group, which meant that they saved money together, they started small businesses together, they campaigned for their communities, they campaigned for the rights of their daughters to be well educated. They did all sorts of amazing things. And these were women who had only really ever lived within that very hierarchical social structure within households. And their jobs had just been to look after the home and the children. And suddenly they were liberated into this group where they got together and they solved the problems of their whole communities. And what I learned from these women was that if you don't know that it's not possible, then it is possible. It was almost like there was no precedent for failure. The skies above their heads were wide open, and they were really able to just go for it with whatever they felt was the right thing to do. And because they had that solidarity and that sense of really being together in this, they achieved incredible things. I met women who had been maybe campaigning for the local builders to stop dredging their lake of sand for building work, and these women had campaigned because this wasn't right, and dozens of women had been taken into the police station and being held there overnight. Now, eventually, so many women were involved in this campaign that the police couldn't hold them anymore, and so they told them to go home. And the women said, "No, we are not going home. We're not going to go home until our demands are met. That we keep our village pond safe." And so they won their campaign simply by having the courage to stay overnight in a police cell. you know, and these women really inspired me. So when I came back to my village, which used to be Britain's most frequently flooded village, I came back home, and people had said over the years, "Oh, you'll never stop the floods." And my dad had campaigned for a while, and he'd even talked to the Environment Agency about, you know, what could be done, and it looked like it might be possible. But whenever we spoke to people, they would say, no, it can't be done. I remember standing outside the corner shop one chilly February morning with a petition to take to the Environment Agency, and people were very willingly signing my petition. And one chap said to me, he said, "You'll never stop the floods. Good luck to you," he said, "but it's always flooded here. It'll always flood here." And now, of course, 10 years later, we haven't had floods for 6 years now in the village, because our campaign was successful. And we had, in fact, in the end, a multi-million-pound flood defence put into the village to save hundreds of homes from flooding. So, and that was really all down to knowing that we couldn't fail, not being sure about how we would succeed, but consistently giving the message to people who were part of the campaign and just saying, look, we can do this. Together, we can achieve anything. You know, even if we have to go dig up the earth ourselves and build the bank to hold the river out, we can do this. And it was a lot easier than that, of course, because the Environment Agency, wonderful chaps that they are, came and built us a wonderful flood defence. So yeah, so that's what I've learned from women, particularly in India, but women around the world are extraordinary.
I mean, it's just phenomenal hearing what you're actually saying. And it is that thing like Stephen Covey talks about, you know, begin with the end in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. When we have a vision, it can be incredibly powerful. And you mentioned earlier that I call myself the relationship artist, and that's exactly what I do. So I help people to create a vision for their lives. And specifically, I help people to create vision for their relationship. Now, I don't know if many of your listeners are going to resonate with that. Do you have a vision for your relationship? Whether you're in one or not, whether you're in one and would like to be in one, whether you're in one and would like it to be better, or whether you're not in one and would like to be in one. I work with people to help them to become really, really clear about who they want to be in a relationship, who they want to be with in a relationship, what kind of feeling they want as they walk around the world in that connected relationship with somebody else. And what I then do is I take their words, when they've become really, really clear, I record our conversations, and I go up into my studio and I listen to their words over and over and over. And as I'm listening, I'm drawing their face, but instead of little sketch lines, I'm drawing words into the lines and into the shadows of their face and into the curls in their hair. And it's an extraordinary thing, because for one, people get the chance to be heard. So for somebody to actually listen, and this is what's wonderful about podcasts, is that you do this wonderful job of listening to people, and the quality of your listening affects everything. It affects the quality that somebody is able to give, how much they're able to give of themselves. And we can see this in relationships too. But so people are listened to, and their vision becomes elaborate and becomes very, very clear as we listen. And then to be able to then see their own words looking back at them through a portrait of their face helps to shift all of those self-limiting beliefs that we might have had before, and helps us to see, I am this woman. I am this woman in a relationship. It's not always women. It's largely, I work more often with women, but I am this woman in this amazing relationship. I am this woman who is grateful for love. I'm this amazing lover. You know, I'm this amazing mother, or I'm this amazing businesswoman. I'm so successful, and I'm so loved, and I'm so loving, or whatever it is that's in this portrait. And it's had an incredible effect on pretty much everyone I've ever created a portrait for. So I worked with a woman a couple of years ago who was desperate to be in a relationship. She hadn't been in a relationship for 6 years. She hadn't even dated in that time, not one date. She was in her early 30s and really hoping to be married and to have a family. And we worked together on her relationship skills. So she came to me just for plain old kind of relationship coaching, and we worked on relationship skills, and there's some brilliant science that I bring into all of my work in coaching. So a lot of it's kind of teaching and coaching. And all of her relationships were being transformed. Her relationship with her mum was transformed. Her relationship with colleagues at work were transformed, and still she didn't date. And 6 months passed, and we'd done this fantastic work together, and eventually we created, or she created, I got her to create her vision board. So she was using images that were really appealing to her about her future. And she created this beautiful image board and talked me through it. And as she spoke, I recorded her. And then I created her portrait. 3 days after she received this portrait, she suddenly started dating. Literally 3 days later, after 6 years of not a single date. So suddenly for her, she was seeing, I think it's that unconscious part of our minds that wakes up and it bypasses the blockages that we have often in our frontal lobes, you know, those kind of, they stop us achieving things because they want to keep us safe. But this unconscious part of her mind was liberated by seeing her face as a woman in a relationship. She started dating and she has fallen in love. So she's had this extraordinary experience of going from being completely single, the most single you could possibly be, to not even wanting to speak to men. She was annoyed with me actually at the beginning of our coaching sessions when I suggested that if we were going to do relationship coaching, she would need to start talking to men, and she found that quite annoying, to being in love. So yeah, it's an incredible journey. I've used them with people in all situations. So a couple came to me who felt that maybe their visions were a little bit on a different track from one another, and as they talked, they sat on my sofa and they talked about their individual dreams and their individual visions, and as they were listening to each other, they just kept turning towards each other with a kind of look of surprise on each other's face, you know, a look of surprise on their face, just thinking, my goodness, I didn't know this about you, and how wonderful. And really, even though they're quite different, we could dovetail these two visions, we could dovetail these dreams together and really live them together. And all sorts of things happened as a result of that. But one of them was that he started talking about leadership. And he'd never been in any kind of leadership position before. He's a very, very solid, very modest, very sound kind of bloke, really a really good guy. And I think he felt maybe that it would be a bit above himself to even talk about that, even to his wife. So she heard it for the first time. But 3 months after they got their portrait, he got a massive promotion at work, and he's been promoted several times since. And he puts it down to seeing the word leadership in his eyebrow, looking down from his study wall at him. So, you know, it works in all kind of contexts. It's worked for me. There was a time when, even though I've kind of got this wonderful set of skills, 10 skills, my husband calls it relationship by numbers, and you literally can go through those skills, and whenever something isn't working in your relationship, you look at where the gap is and you put that skill into place and things start working again. But there was a time when I was so cross, I was so upset, that I didn't want to use my relationship skills. I didn't want to make things better. And this was before I knew what these portraits were doing. This was very, very much in the early days. And so I kind of just did what felt natural, which was to go up to my studio and start drawing my own portrait. And I wrote about the love I wanted to feel in my relationship, and the gratitude I wanted to have for my husband, and the mother I wanted to be, and the wife I wanted to be, and all of these things, and all the love and beauty that I wanted in my life. And that evening, when we sat down together on the sofa, I was suddenly able to pour out all my sadness. And I did it in a skillful way, and I didn't use you know, all the pointing the finger and all the criticism and all the negative things that of course don't help a conversation. But I was suddenly able to be vulnerable in a way that I really hadn't been before in our relationship. And as I was vulnerable, he was just there, and he sat and he listened, and I felt the answer to that kind of nagging question in my head: are you really there for me? And that shifted everything in our relationship. It was a very big step for me, from having a lovely functional relationship to suddenly having a relationship where that question was answered: yes, he really is here for me. And so this is the kind of thing that I now teach to individuals and to couples. And whenever I get the chance, because I love the drawing, of course, I use the vision portraits within my work, within my coaching.
Okay, so you're actually an artist.
Well, you could call me an artist. I tend to think of it as a coaching tool. So I see myself as a coach first and an artist second, a portrait artist specifically, because I don't really go out there and do any other art. It's really just that kind of using the art, using the portraiture to make the coaching work really, really well. I do love portraiture. I spent a summer in Florence once in an atelier learning how to create portraits from life and using the old methods of the Renaissance master artists, which was wonderful. And I did it again in London a few years later. So I've had a little bit of kind of art training, very, very little really in comparison to the coaching. But I love to use it because it makes such a difference.
So I'm just curious, are you fascinated by people's faces?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. You can learn so much from a person's face. I used to know a man, he's passed away now, who would say, your face is, what did he say exactly? Something about your face is an accident, or it's not your fault until you're 40. So a face is basically down to your genetic code until the age of 40. After that, your face is your fault. So basically meaning that we live, don't we? We live inside our faces. We create these smile lines. We create the kind of curiosity creases on our foreheads. We create those lovely furrows that when we concentrate, as long as you don't Botox them away. And what our faces do, of course, is that we are able to empathize with one another by looking at each other's faces. And there's two things about that are interesting. One is that our mirror neurons need to be able to move our own face to reflect the face of the other person. So if you've got a friend, you're chatting to a friend who's really going through something pretty hard, you'll find that your face is contorting into the same pain that they are feeling. And there've been experiments where researchers have really struggled. They've been filming faces from a distance, interacting, women talking to each other about difficult issues. And the film footage without the audio of those conversations makes it very difficult to actually tell who's the one who's suffering and who's the one who's listening and empathizing, because we mirror each other. And it's one of the reasons why I'll never have surgery, because it impairs our ability to really to make our creases work, to empathize with one another. And of course, the other thing about faces, and particularly eyes, is that we can calm one another's physiology. Our brains are open limbic systems. You know, it's all very well to talk about kind of taking yourself to a higher plane and meditating and being above it all. Even saying, some people say we don't need one another, but physiologically, we actually do need each other. We need each other to kind of calm our limbic system when our brains are overloaded, when we're stressed, when we're panicking. It's very like a baby. You know, all the attachment science behind a baby's cry, firing off in those very the most primitive parts of the brain are screaming out in the same way that baby's actually crying. And when the caretaker then takes that baby and cuddles it, whether that's a mother or whoever that primary kind of attachment figure is, the whole of that child's brain circuitry changes. They relax and they actually start to build hardware that enables them to self-soothe eventually. And we kind of think that ends during childhood, but it doesn't. As adults, and particularly in those close connected relationships, particularly when you're committed to somebody for life, that person becomes your attachment figure. And when you're stressed, even if you don't even see it on each other's faces, when you're stressed, there's the part of your brain that was that baby crying is still firing. And we're able to support each other. We're able to calm that part of the brain down by having lovely, connected and securely attached relationships. And there's a lot of science behind this. I don't know if you've come across Sue Johnson at all, Professor Sue Johnson. She
Yes, I used to work with her.
No.
Yeah.
Well, there we are.
Yeah.
So she put people into fMRI scanners to watch what happened to that reptilian part of the brain when they were in unhappy marriages. And they would be asked, I don't know how they got this research through the ethics committees, but they were told when they saw a little cross flashing above their heads, they had a 20% chance of having electric shock to their ankles. So these women, when they saw these crosses, obviously the part of the brain that was anxious would become anxious, would light up. Occasionally they'd have a sting to the ankle and they'd experience some pain. Now, they then gave the women a stranger's hand to hold while they were in the scanner. And this slightly reduced the pain and the anxiety. When they gave them the hand to hold of their partner, who they were in a negative or kind of really tricky relationship with, the pain got worse and the anxiety got worse. Now, then she worked with those couples for 16 weeks. And she worked on basically one major thing, which was the cry, "Are you there for me?" And teaching one another to hear each other shouting, "Are you there for me?" Because of course we say that in so many ways, don't we? We say, "Look, you haven't put the bins out again this week. Look, I thought it was your job." What we're really saying is, "Are you there for me?" You know, we haven't done the washing up together. We haven't taken that trip that I really, really wanted to take. Are you there for me? Is really what we're asking in so many different ways. And often we ask it unskillfully, don't we? We ask it through conflict rather
Absolutely.
than through loving, connected ways.
Yeah.
And she taught these couples to hear each other's cries, "Are you there for me?" And then to respond to them in a positive way that said, "Yes, I'm here for you. Unequivocally, I am absolutely here for you." And then she put them back into the scanners. Again, their brains would light up when they saw the little cross, and with a stranger's hand, a slight reduction in pain. But when they held the hands of their husbands, mostly they were married, they held the hands of their husbands who had learnt to say, "I'm there for you." And the pain was negligible. They said it was mild discomfort and the anxiety was completely gone. So those pictures of the brain either lighting up in fear or being calmed are all because we have this physical ability to calm one another's physiology. And that also means that people in strong, happy, connected relationships live longer. So according to Professor John Gottman, couples in happy relationships live on average 15 years longer than people in unhappy relationships. It's a staggering figure.
Yeah, it is.
Absolutely staggering. Across all marriages, you know, all the scientists agree that we live 4 years longer if we're married than if we're not. But that accounts for all the negative relationships where you're more likely actually to become ill. Yeah. So if you're in a painful relationship, you have a 35% higher chance of contracting contagious diseases if there's a level of contempt within your relationship than you do if you're in a happy, calm relationship. So the science of love is so fascinating. And if only we knew this stuff, if only we knew it inside out, our relationships could be so much more wonderful. And that's certainly been, you know, my story.
All right, it's extraordinary hearing you because I'm actually, and again, this actually comes from the Indian community because I've had in my long career the privilege of speaking to people from all over the world. And I'm very much reminded of quite a few couples, but there's two different couples in particular. And the first couple, by the time I met them, both of them were, one was almost 90 and the other was well into their 90s. And basically the husband was just very much interested in himself, his own academic career, been a doctor and so on. And he just considered his wife, you know, well, you know, she just came from a peasant community and so on. And very interestingly, they had two children, and their children always visited them begrudgingly, and it just showed up in so many different ways, with contempt and dismissiveness, and especially towards the mother. And another couple, well into they had about a 60-year marriage, and the husband, before he got married and before he had any idea who he was going to get married, actually we had a long chat with his father and said that he wanted a woman who would make him a better version of himself. I thought, extraordinary. And at the point I met him, he was telling me all these wonderful things about his wife. And then I happened to bump into her, and she's telling me about this, and this. My husband, he supported me in working in our business together. And when I was just then fed up with the business and I wanted to do accountancy, he just organized for me to go to an accountancy school. And our children always come back to visit us, even though they're spread across the world. They always come back to visit us, and they love it. And it's true, because it shows up in how they actually care for their parents. And I've got a close friend who's also Indian, and she really wanted to marry the bad boys. She wanted to marry the bikers, the guys that would do awful things, and just take her to the edge of her life. And then her dad had a big word with her. And he said, really, what do you really want? And she said, actually, I want a man with me who will down tools if we ever have anything go wrong with our children, if we're blessed with them. And it's exactly what happened. And the sad bit is that on the birth of one of their children, he came into the world with a very short time to stay. And husband was there. He had down tools, closed the business for a few days, and was with her through that. And they were blessed with a couple of more children. And it just shows up when there is an intention for the attention within the relationship. And it's not just for the couple that get married. It goes down the generations, and it's not about I'm looking after my parents because this is my duty or my obligation. It becomes, I'm looking after my parents because I want to look after my parents. I love them.
Yeah, it's powerful stuff, isn't it? It's really powerful.
It is. And it's good to hear that there's people like you because it's not something I really hear about in Western communities, where people talk about having an intention or an idea really about how they want their relationship to be going. It's like, get together and anticipate everything will go well, but there's no plan for it in a meaningful way.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think Hollywood sells us, well, the Beatles, sold us the line, didn't they? All you need is love.
Yes.
And it's really not true. It's not all you need. You need a lot more than love. Hollywood, if you're lucky, you'll meet the one. And of course, as long as you've met the one, everything will go swimmingly. But that's not the case, whether you believe in the one or not. There's a lot more to making a relationship successful. I love meeting couples who have great relationships, because they will say to me, they'll say, no, Kath, it's not about skill. It's all about fate. We were fated to be together, and we're still together. And the great thing about that is it really tallies with what John Gottman says, which is the most successful couples, when they meet each other, they put on rose-colored spectacles and they never, ever take them off. So they see each other in this light, and they accentuate the positive. And the other thing that I love about those couples who think it's all about fate is that when I talk to them about their relationship, and when I watch them texting each other to make arrangements, or calling each other, or seeing each other, you can tick off all the skills. Are they responsive to one another? Yes, they are. Are they positive about each other when they're away from each other? Yes, they are. Are they able to express appreciation for each other? Yes, they are. Do they spend time together? Yes, they do. They spend that quality 5 hours together that we need if we're going to ride out the storms of life together. And the list goes on. And I can literally take my 10-point skills checklist And when I'm talking to people in great relationships who think they're doing nothing, they're unconscious of what they're doing, I can literally tick these things off. And of course, that's what the science of love has done over the last 4 decades. It's very, very new, kind of early days for the science of love and relationships. But what's happened is that couples have been observed, hundredths of a second interactions by the Gottman Institute and other colleagues, mostly in North America, actually. Sadly, very few in the UK, where I'm from, have really taken this really exciting area of science and run with it. But looking at couples who are making it work and trying to figure out, well, what is it that they are doing that these other people are not doing? And you'd think it was, it seems to be a mystery, doesn't it? But it's very, very specific. The science is really, really clear about, what little skills, what little interactions are different when couples are working and when couples are not working. And I like to think of it as a ship. So the key 3 things that you need to make your relationship work, shit, it's cheesy, isn't it? I know, is to have that sound hull of friendship first. And each plank within that sound hull of friendship is another skill. If you've got holes in your friendship, then your relationship is not going to go anywhere. You're not going to reach happily ever island. You're not going to have that wonderful experience that you're talking about that couple, whose children wanted to come back over and over again. And why did they want to come back? Because their parents had created a beautiful atmosphere on board that ship. They'd made this a place that was welcoming and warm and maybe even adventurous. When we have the sound hull of friendship, then we can start thinking about the sails. And that's emotion. Emotion is the wind in the sails of our relationships. And if we know how to manage emotion, how to harness all the good emotions, how to deal with the tricky ones, how to mend the sails when things go wrong, as they inevitably do in relationships, then we've got the equipment to make that ship go somewhere. But most relationships don't even think about where they're going, which takes us full circle back to this idea of a vision. Do you have a vision for your relationship? Do you have dreams? And I like to think of it as standing in the crow's nest, looking out, trying to picture your happily ever island and wondering, am I going in the right direction? Then you need to think, well, are the habits, are the rituals that we're creating within our relationship, is the culture on this relationship actually going to take us towards that happily ever island? It's like the ship's wheel. Am I turning the ship in the right direction? Am I turning it towards happily ever island, or am I turning it towards the icebergs, the 4 relationship killers that are actually going to, puncture the ship's hull and drown the relationship? Because of course, in the science of relationships, it's very, very clear what we must avoid if we want our relationships to work and not fail.
Yeah. Listen, you mentioned appreciation there. So how do you show appreciation to your husband?
Oh, there's many ways of showing appreciation. One of the most interesting theories I've come across, which a lot of people really love when I teach, is by Gary Chapman, called The Love Languages, the 5 Love Languages, which talks about how we like to be appreciated in so many different ways. We like to hear love in many different ways. And it may be that we like to be appreciated by words of appreciation and words of admiration. When we actually say, gosh, you're really amazing at what you do. I love your intellect. I love your passion for your work. I love the way you really go for it. Or it may be that we love to spend that quality time together, and you feel loved when you're just spending time talking or doing activities together. Or it may be gifts. You may think, well, actually, it's all very well to spend time with me and say nice words, but I really feel cherished when I know that you've been away and you've seen something that I would love and you've brought it home to me. It means that you were thinking about me. You were there for me when we weren't even in the same vicinity. We weren't even together. So that gift means something to me. Or it may be acts of service. Well, it's all very well, gifts are fabulous, but unless you're actually going to help me to achieve my goals in life, then are you really there for me? Do you really appreciate me? Are we really in this together? Do you really love me? So whether that's, helping around the home, helping with the kids, helping at the office, whatever it is, or whether it's making one another's dreams come true in really practical ways. And then the last of the 5 love languages is physical touch. Well, you can do all these wonderful things, but unless you're really holding me close, unless you're really there for me in a physical, tangible way, then I don't feel loved. So, you know, we could be one of any number of those. Now, when we're dating, we do all of those things. We just naturally, our ego boundaries drop, and we tend to touch each other, tend to give each other gifts, spend time together, say wonderful things about each other. And do things to help one another. But then our kind of time passes and we fall back into our natural way of being, don't we? It's like having a mother tongue, and we use our mother tongue, and we speak love to our partner in the way that we understand love. But unless our partner's language is the same as ours, then they're not going to hear I love you. So like if I say to you, yeah, yes, good day, would you know what that meant?
No. So listen, just bring you back to my question. And how do you show love?
Well, I was getting to that.
Appreciation to your husband, rather. Appreciation to your husband.
I was getting to that. Yeah. I was getting to that because we, my husband and I, of the 5 love languages, my top language is his bottom language.
Right.
His top language, his most kind of mother tongue, is my bottom language. So his love language is acts of service. So for him, it's really important to know that I can do practical things to make his life better. And that makes him feel really, really loved. So I do that in often quite stereotypical ways, making the home lovely and welcoming when he comes home, making food for him, just doing real practical things around the house for him to say, you know, I'm here for you practically. I love you. Now, that is really my least favorite language. Right. My top language is quality time. So I love to just sit and talk and connect and you know, talk about ideas and dreams, and you know, that's what I love to do. And of course, if we hadn't understood this principle of love languages, we would constantly be missing each other. We wouldn't know. I wouldn't know that doing the things that feel a little bit like drudgery to me actually say I love you. And knowing that it says I love you means that I can do it with a happy heart instead of grumpily. Sometimes I'm still grumpy, of course, but I can do those things to say I love you, and it doesn't feel like a kind of it doesn't feel like I'm a 50s housewife. And for him, you know, actually putting aside that time to spend just talking and being together in the way that I love to feel loved, he wouldn't know that that was important either. So understanding each other and learning these skills together, I think is so important if we want to have happy, strong relationships that create that lovely environment for everybody, you know, whether we've got children or not.
Very beautiful. So listen, Cathy, I'm very conscious you're a very young woman. So you have a long way to go in life.
I'm not sure I would say very young.
Well, it's perception, right?
Thank you. Yes, I'm 44, so not quite halfway through.
No, not by a long shot. So when you get to the end of your life and you're looking back, what is it that you will have had done that is your biggest contribution to world peace?
Wow, that's a big question. Wow. Well, I like to use that exercise, you know, looking back over your life. I quite regularly do it here and now. So I quite often project myself into the future, and I imagine myself aged 100, looking back over my life, coming to the end of my life, wondering who I'll be surrounded by, what they'll be saying about me, what I'll be hearing, what I'll be saying to them, what I'll be feeling proud of, what I'll be grateful for. And the things that stand out when I conjure up that picture for myself are people with more love in their lives. So knowing that through teaching these very simple, small skills to as many people as possible, then I will be able to help people create more love in their lives. And this is why I get such a buzz from what I'm doing. You know, I was with a client this morning, and as we were talking about what she needed in her life, in her relationship, I got a sense as we were speaking that just these tiny skills that we were talking about were going to make such a huge difference to her. And you know, I look at a lot of people I've worked with, and they talk about how their lives have been transformed, and not just their relationships. Often it's the people around them, their families, and it spills over into all sorts of other areas of life. So just feeling that because I'm able to share these simple skills, then more people will have loving, lasting relationships and just have happier days with more love in them. I think that's the thing that I'm going to feel most grateful to have been able to do during my life. That and portraits, of course. I often think as I'm lying there towards the end of my life, just looking at these images around me that I've been able to create. And I love, like we've said, you know, I love faces, and I love to be surrounded by beautiful faces. And faces with a message, you know, it feels like something worthwhile.
Very beautiful. Thank you for your time.
Well, you're very welcome. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for asking me.
You're welcome. And until we meet again.
Thank you very much.